Hello. In this video, we are focusing on this new topic that we call making meaning conferences, and we are going to talk more about what making meaning conference is, what activities are involved in the making meaning conferences. So, um, but first, let's just go back and review something about the science notebook, especially the components of the science notebook. We remember that in our science notebook, we need to have a focus question or a challenge. Also, we need to put predictions, basically depending on the focus questions. So the data acquisition, that includes experimentation or observations and other ways that we use to acquire data or to obtain information. And then we have data display. This includes charts, graphs, tables, and other ways that we can display data. The last part, after all these things are done, the last part is the making meaning conference. So that is something that we are discussing today. So this is the part, the making meaning conference. That is, we are trying to make sense of the data. That's what making meaning conference means. Making sense of our data. Now, when conducting science notebook, the first thing to do about making meaning conference is to look at how do we get information from the focus question. For example, you have your focus question and you have done all your experiments and you get to a conclusion. What do you do? After you do all the experiments and you get to a conclusion, you can make a claim. So you can make a claim which is a statement or conclusion about the focus question you were investigating. Right? So you ask the question, you conducted an experiment, you make a conclusion, and that conclusion is a claim. So you can say, based on my data, I claim this. I claim that this happens this way. But then someone can ask you, on what basis are you claiming this conclusion? On what basis are you making this conclusion? Then you can say, you know what? I have evidence. So for every claim you make as a scientist, you need to provide evidence. And then evidence is the scientific data. So evidence is the scientific data that supports the claim. So you can say, you know what, I claim this based on the experiment I have done. When I changed this changed. So based on that, I think I can conclude this, or I can make this claim. So every claim must have evidence from which you are making that claim. And definitely, after you do your experiment, you want to develop a theory. You want to develop a theory or an explanation of the data. Like when you say, if I change this one changes. Then you can ask yourself, why does this change when I change this? And your answer will be, I think this changes because of this and this and this. So what you are doing is you are explaining based on the evidence that you have. So the explanation based on evidence is known as justification. So that's how you approach focus question in science. So you ask a question, you conduct an experiment, you make a conclusion, and that conclusion becomes a claim. And then for you to make this conclusion, you need to have data that is supporting the conclusion. The data supporting the conclusion is known as evidence. But then you can produce theory based on your data. So the theory produced from an experiment, or the theory that we use to explain our observations, to explain our experiment, is known as justification. So these are part of science notebook. When you are preparing science notebook for your students, you need to teach them how to make claims, how to use evidence, and how to reason or how to make justification. So make sure they deal with all these parts in their science notebook, because that helps to make meaning of the activity that they are doing. So what is this making meaning conference? It's just basically uh, making sense of the activities they are doing, making sense of the science inquiry. And it is an addition of the last part of the science notebook process. So it is an addendum to the notebook process. But what are the levels of making meaning conference? Normally, for making meaning conference, I encourage that each and every teacher should make sure that you have two groups of making, or you have two levels of making meaning conference. You are making meaning conference at group level, so you can do it per group, and you are making meaning conference at an individual level. So when we say group level, we mean like small groups, like the groups of 4, like we usually sit in our class, and the whole class. Now, when you are writing a lesson plan that includes making meaning conference, I expect you, when I ask you, give me a making meaning conference activity, I expect the making meaning conference activity to have uh, actually 2 levels, but in terms of subgroups, should have 3 levels. Right? So you should have individual level. You need to talk about how are you going to make meaning for each student in your class. How are you going to make meaning for each group in your class? And how are you going to make meaning for the whole class? So it's your job to make sure that your students understand this is what we are learning. This is our objective, and this is what we have come out of the class. based on this activity, these are the conclusion. So you can determine that based on the making meaning conference. An important part in making meaning conference is to have a data organizer. So in your second lesson plan, when I ask you for a making meaning conference, I need to see things like tables that you are using to organize data, charts. You can use a Venn diagram. So these are activities that you can use to organize data. So in this case, you want your students to record and display their data. So here I'll put A. And then you want them to use their data to examine the patterns that they can see from their data. And then you want them to provide evidence for the claims that they make. So looking at the data, what conclusion can you make? And based on this data, point out the evidence that can lead to this conclusion. So as a teacher, what you do, you can put this organizer, a data organizer on the board and then ask each group to come in front and write something based on their experiment. So they write their observation. This is what we observe. Observation you just describe. And then they make their claims and conclusions and talk about how they can apply. So each group will do that. And as a class, you want to make meaning of what the groups have put in front. So you want to discuss that information in your class. So like uh, discussion of tables, charts, the ones that you put on the board, that one is a whole class discussion, like a bigger group discussion. So for your lesson plan, I want to see this. When I say, give me a making meaning conference, I want to see this. And I want you to tell me how you are going to use the charts, the data organizers, how you are going to use the data organizers. What evidence are they going to be producing? So as we said, we have charts, tables, and concept maps, among others, as data organizers. So this is like an example of a concept map. So cows, what do cows do? They produce milk. So let me just erase this part. Where is my pointer? So cows produce milk, and then milk is important to cats, is important to humans, important to cows. Provide leather, used for, used for, used for. So that this concept map that we are seeing here is informing your students, or is making your students understand more about cows. In that case, they are making meaning of what they just learned. But what are the guiding principles of what are the guiding principles for planning and implementing this making meaning conference. Right? So as a teacher, you want to ask appropriate questions. So questions that can elicit students' understanding. So that's the first part. What are the guiding questions I'm going to use to elicit their understanding of the activity that we have done? And then you create discussion scaffolds. What are the sentence starters I am going to use? What are the frames I am going to use as we make meaning of the learning? Something one other thing that we are also going to focus on is what we call questioning techniques. So we have a good questioning technique that we call wait time. So we'll look more at this wait time and see what it means. So in terms of questioning strategies in this making meaning conference, you want to make sure that you are making connections to what students already know, or from what students already know to the new concept. You need to make this connection between what they know and the new concept they are going to learn. And then, as I said previously, you want to provide a frame to guide making sense of the science content. Normally, you want to use research-based ideas to help them make meaning of the activities they are doing in science or their science notebook process. So in terms of the questions you can use, these are some of the sample questions. The questions that are going to guide them understand what they just learned. What do you think caused this to grow? So what do you think caused dash to grow? So it can be a tree, or it can be an animal, it can be a plant. Why did you decide to organize your data or results like that? What does the graph tell you? So you are trying to get as much understanding as possible from your students. You can see this one is a frame. If that continues to, what will be the result? So it's a frame, also a question. This is a sentence starter, like a sentence starter, but also like a question. What is the best sequence for? Right? So you need to create questions like these to enhance the making meaning of what the students are learning. They need to understand these are the activities we are doing, but we are doing these activities to understand these objectives, or this is what these activities mean. So you can use also cues instead of just questions. So examples are compare your evidence with the evidence from another group. So the cues, they help them to conduct the activity itself. Compare the to the. Clarify what you mean by. Can you summarize your data? So when giving students cues, you are just guiding them to do something. Like in this case, you are guiding them to summarize something. Here you are guiding them to be more clear in what they are doing. Here you are asking them to compare. So the cues are there to guide them through the process of making meaning. So one way to provide guide is to give them as a teacher, you need to have discussion scaffolds. These discussion scaffolds should be purposive. Like you want to develop capacity for debate. They need to be able to debate as they do their activity. They need to be able to question, to examine scientific interpretation. So you want to teach them that. You want to guide them through that by frames, by sentence starters, by having good questions. And also these scaffolds, it encourages active participation and argumentation because you are giving them the direction. So even students who felt that, I can't do this, but if you give them sentence starters, they should be able to use those starters to answer questions or to get involved in the discussion. So these scaffolds, as we said earlier, scaffolds usually are short term. These are the type of support that you give them just to enhance understanding in a short term. So you may decide that you just put these scaffolds on the board. You can use PowerPoint or you can use transparency to show them the frames you are using, to show them the sentence starters you are using. Or you may decide, let me just print the scaffolds so that as they are conducting their activities, they can look at the scaffolds, the sentence starters, the frames. They can look at those as or for reference. So your job as a teacher is to guide your students through the Making Meaning conference by giving them these scaffolds or discussion scaffolds. So examples of discussion scaffolds, you can write sentence like, I claim this specific observation because I claim this because, so the students are going to finish here. I know that centipedes are like something, something, something. My evidence supports my claim because I would like to add to what someone claimed because I think I need a clarification of something because something. So these ones are sentence starters and frames. So this is a starter, another one here, another one here, another one here. These two are frames. So these are the scaffolds that you give to your students to help them understand more what you are doing. Now, in terms of questioning techniques, we talked about wait time or wait times. So a wait time is a questioning technique. So what you do in this technique is that you ask a question to your students and then you wait for 3 seconds or more after a student responds to your question. So what you do is you ask a question, and you don't select a student to answer a question like immediately. So you ask, you pause, you look around the class as your students are raising their hands. So wait at least 3 seconds. Then you select a student to answer the question. You do this twice. We have two types of wait time. We have wait time 1 and wait time 2. So in the first wait time, you ask a question and you wait for 3 seconds or more. After that, you select a student to answer your question. So that is wait time 1. Now, when one student answers your question, instead of saying, good, that's fine, excellent, you wait more. You wait 3 seconds more. So that is wait time 2. So ask your question, wait 3 seconds, then select a student to answer your question. After that student answers a question, maybe you just nod while looking around the class to see if there are other students who want to answer the same question. So that is wait time 2. Why is it important? So before talking about its importance, we are just going to repeat what I said. You ask a question, you wait the first 3 minutes, then you select a student. And then wait again to see if other students will answer the same question or if other students are going to add to what the first student has answered. So this is wait time technique. Wait time technique is advantageous for several reasons. First, students have time to think because you are giving them more time to think before they answer the question. And you will see that more students are going to answer your question because you have given them time to think. Even if the first student has answered the question, other students would want to add to what the first student has answered because you have given them more time to reflect on the question, and then they can get involved in the discussion. Also, English as second language learners, you are giving them more time to think because sometimes they can hear something in English and they think using their local language and then translate it to English again. So this takes time. If you provide wait time, you are giving more chances to these students whose first language is not English. So as a teacher, wait time is something that you need to pursue as a questioning technique. How do you prepare for a Making Meaning conference? So you do this before class. So first, you need to have that data organizer. If you are going to use a table, you need to have your table ready. You need to prepare questions beforehand, at least guiding questions. During the Making Meaning conference activity itself, you can add questions based on your students' understanding. But at least you need to have like skeleton questions that you are going to use to elicit your students' understanding. So as I showed you at the beginning, this is also another sample data organizer. So you have a table. Group 1 will come and fill this part about forces in newtons. Group 2 will fill this part all the way to this group. And then you have average. So the whole class is seeing what groups have obtained during their experiments. And the whole class can discuss based on this data organizer, because the groups are writing this in front where everyone can see in class. And then during the making meaning conferences, you can ask, what do you observe? Do we observe any trend in this data? What is missing or what is strange? Can you explain why we have these values here? As you are doing that, you are giving your students a chance to explain, to explore the activities, to provide evidence based on this data. And the students can also make claims based on the sample, based on the data organizers. So in terms of making meaning conference, as you show them the data organizer, you want your students to look back to the data, what they have already collected, give them some guiding questions which will help them interpret the data, because these students are young, they need help. So if you give them guiding questions, you are helping them to review their data and try to make more sense of it, to try to create explanations. If they made a hypothesis at the beginning, they can use their data to say, I think I reject my hypothesis, or we accept the hypothesis based on what they have produced in the lab, and also based on the guiding questions that you have given them. Another important part of making meaning conference is reflection. So students need to reflect on what they have written. So I mean, just ask them, just, we have done this activity. Tell me, write down what the lesson was about. What have you learned in this lesson? Maybe share that with your friends, or tell me what did you get from your friends, from your colleagues. Now you are giving them a chance. Then do you have any questions, or do you have any additions that you want to contribute to the class? So this is reflection time. So let me go back to say, they do their notebook activity. After that, they are making meaning of everything. They are explaining, they are interpreting data. And then in the end, you ask them to reflect on the data. So reflection should be a very big part of science, of making sense of science process. So in the lesson plan 2, which focuses on making meaning conference, you need to make sure that you include the reflection part in your lesson plan. How are your students going to reflect what they have learned based on your lesson plan? So some of the questions that you can ask them for reflection: did you do this investigation the way the other students did it? right? Tell me about it. What would you like to improve on this investigation or on this lesson or on this activity? What process did you go through to produce these results? What story do your results tell? As they answer these questions, they are reflecting upon the activities. So these are just sample questions. You should have more than this. So normally when I'm doing this in class, I ask the students to identify a specific activity, state what hypothesis they need to test, what form of data are they collecting, and for your student, what activity are you going to do as a making meaning conference, or how are you going to bring together what your students have learned. So this information is important. In your lesson plan number 2, I need to see making meaning conference. So if I tell you, give me a making meaning conference, what do I want to see? I want to see data organizers in there. I want to see how your students are going to discuss, or how are you going to explain based on the data organizers. I want to see that you have given your students something to reflect. And an important thing, when I give you this lesson plan that includes making meaning conference, I want you to tell me that, I will discuss with individual students. So I will discuss with individual students. Then I will discuss with individual groups. So you must have an activity for students, you must have an activity for individual groups, and you must have an activity for the whole class. A whole class discussion. So if you don't have all this information, that your making meaning conference will not be complete. So you need to take note of that. Thank you.